Ladies and gentlemen, fellow listeners, today's guest is Pavel Durov. Pavel Durov is the founder of Telegram and vContact. This is not an interview, in fact, but this is an analysis going over the interviews and information I could find about him. I guess Pavel Durov, to begin, the biggest takeaway I got from him is just that you don't need to live life to the status quo and just how different he is from other billionaire founders, right? So he's worth $15.5 billion, and the only shareholders are him and his older brother. And while doing so, he never drinks, smokes, and he looks like a fitness influencer around 25 or 30, despite being at the age of 40. And is in a sense a digital nomad, right? He's traveled to a lot of countries and worked in them after he left Russia, and he's currently residing in Dubai. But he's also traveled to a lot of countries, and interestingly, he also traveled to my home country of Kyrgyzstan. And yeah, but on top of that, he only has 30 employees. For a company worth $30 billion, that is just absurd, right? And he did this while not really being a part of the Silicon Valley tech hub. He built his first company in Russia and then Telegram in Dubai. And then to begin the story, he was born in Russia and he lived in Italy for a little while. But his first startup, vContact, was called Russia's Facebook. But interestingly, did build it similar to how Mark Zuckerberg relied on the Harvard University's reputation, and he first began it as a tool for the Harvard University students. And similarly, Pavel started for the prestigious Russian University of St. Petersburg State University. However, he was not a computer science major, but a student in philology, which is the study of language. He built a site for the students in his department of philology to be able to share lectures and materials that they miss. Similar to how Mark Zuckerberg built on top of the reputation and also just what he worked on, Pavel did the same, and he diverted the attraction to VK, and VK suddenly grew with other prestigious universities and eventually became a site of millions of users, right? And while building this, there's a lot of lessons, and the biggest lesson and something that he said is so valuable that it defined his career is that as the sole member of the product team, I had to work as a front-end developer, back-end developer, UX UI designer, system administrator, and product manager all at once. I got to understand the basics of all these jobs. I learned the tiniest details of how a social network works. And additionally, he said that everything can be done quickly. I built the version of vContact in 2006, or VK, in a month. It started growing immediately. Contrary to popular belief, work is either done quickly and efficiently or slowly and poorly. And so this was a period of his life where he was just obsessed. And he did things quickly, and he also built from the bottom up. He said he tried to not rely on third-party plugins when he was initially building it. And that all that mattered was the code. And this was just a period of the focus. And, I think it's especially important, as a recent interview of Sam Altman, how, when you're building your career, much like how objects have momentum, it requires a lot of force and energy at the beginning. And maybe it might be unhealthy to do so, right? But that is sort of required to start the momentum. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to build vContact quick enough and build upon the organic growth as he was soon graduating his university. And also to just compete with other social media companies that were arising at that time, like Facebook. And as he scaled his company, his brother Nikolai joined as the CEO, and which was very, very important. I think even if we don't exactly know what he specifically did, it's just the fact of how smart his brother is. His brother is a three-time world mathematics champion and champion in informatics and programming, and also holds double PhDs in mathematics, so just a genius in all aspects. And back to an interview I had of a founder named David Woodworth. He's one of the 10 startups or 15 startups in Korea that were selected to partner with OpenAI. And his startup now has around 1 million users. And he says one of the most important reasons is because he just had such a great co-founder, right? And it's not just the fact that the co-founder is great, but it's what that co-founder brings, which is the teams and the people who want to work for that co-founder, right? Because his co-founder was a ex-founding engineer at Napster. A lot of engineers reached out to him, and the mere reason they wanted to join is just so that they can learn and work for someone who they admire. I think this also played a large role, right? Talent is very important. This is what Steve Jobs always also says, which is that his favorite product is not Apple or whatever, but his team. And then his brother later on played a pivotal role as he was the chief architect, and he created the security procedures and technology for Telegram, which is the primary selling point of Telegram. Yeah, so I guess the listeners at home would just be thinking like, it would be nice to have a team member, a co-founder who's talented, right? Easy to do, right? But then this also shows how having, we have to, unless we have exceptional brothers like that, we also have to find other exceptional people, and we need to hold them to a high standard, because having a high standard like him allows, it just is so much, it's such a high amount of leverage, right? And we'll meet a lot of people in our lives, but at least for me, what I've learned is I need to just have really high standards, because that high standards, and also I need to become someone to be able to bring about the high standards, like how Pavel needed to scale his company to a certain degree before his brother was interested in working with him, right? So, but just having the high standard for the people you hire. It's something also he does while building Telegram. Telegram organizes hackathons where there's a large prize pool, and there's been more hackathons than the amount of engineers, which also shows how selective they are, because basically if you win the hackathon with some of the smartest minds in the world competing for it, you get to have a chance to work for Telegram. Like, that is the gift, not the money. And he says that we select the best of the best engineers as a result of the competition that we organize, and it's a very selective pool with only 30 engineers. As VK grew to millions of users, the Russian government started mounting pressures on the user information of protesters from 2011. However, he published the official request of the government, actually, and responded to them with a famous photo of a dog with a hoodie with a tongue hanging out as his way of making fun of it, right? However, this fun did not really last, as he was quoted saying that the armed policemen would come to my house, try to break in, because I refused to take down the opposition groups during the Ukrainian protests of 2014. By shareholders, by other companies, by the Russian government directly. He was forced to sell his company for a lot less than he could have, and he left Russia for his own security. However, it was during this precise moment that the birth of Telegram actually occurred, as the idea of Telegram came when we were still based in Russia, because at some point we had this very stressful situation where armed policemen would come to my house, try to break in, because I refused to take down the opposition groups that I mentioned earlier. And I realized there is no secure means of communication. I realized I want to tell my brother what's going on, to coordinate whatever we want to do. And every tool to communicate the way I thought I could use was not really secure, not encrypted. It was not safe to use them. So I thought it could be a good idea to actually come up with a decently encrypted messaging app. My brother, being the genius that he is, he was able to create this encryption standard that we're using up till this day with minor changes. So it's precisely the moment when things were not working out for him, when he was being forced to leave the company that was his baby that he'd worked on for almost a decade, that he was actually able to build and come up with the idea for the company that became even more successful than VK. And he writes and reflects a lot on his journey from VK to Telegram in his almost yearly posts in his own Telegram channel. And this is the meat of what I learned from him. And the biggest thing he always just says all the time, like if you go through his Telegram, probably the most common word is drinking, because he really is against drinking. And he has an interesting argument that free Spartans never drank wine, but they diligently got their slaves drunk, who were required to drink 4 cups of wine a day. That is why any large slave rebellion was suppressed by a small force of Spartan troops, right? And his father was actually a professor in Roman history, so I think that checks out in terms of how accurate it is. But in this, he always mentions how important it was not to drink, and how he always, every single year, religiously almost says the biggest advice is to not drink, right? And quote, never under any circumstances drink alcohol. And Pavel himself also admitted in another of his posts where he's not hating on people who drink. If you just want to enjoy, then there's no problem. But if you want to create and change the world in a meaningful way, or to do great things, you just can't. It's quite negative, and I'm not exactly sure, but this is something he always talks about. And I think if someone always repeats something, there's got to be an important reason why, right? And another advice, and this advice has really been, I've actually implemented this really strictly in my life, is his arguments against content consumption. He says that it is unfortunate that most people prefer to feed their minds not with real life facts that can let us change the world, but with random Netflix series or TikTok videos. On a deep level, our brain can't tell fiction from reality, so the abundance of digital entertainment keeps our subconscious mind busy producing solutions to problems that do not exist. And no one's really ever said this in this way, and this has really resonated with me. And I've put on actually screen time for all my social media apps of 1 minute and given the passcode to my sister because I was thinking about how the content, like specifically Instagram, where I was listening to a lot of, I guess, martial arts, UFC, but also a lot of, just being honest, those cringy Generation Z type of Instagram reels with the dancing. And I don't know, I forgot like the weird memes and trends like the chill guy. I'm not sure if my audience will be familiar, but basically just memes. And how I would be walking from school and I would actually be thinking about them, or just even my dreams I had at night where it wasn't exactly about them, but in reflection, a lot of the dreams I had were not the best, especially when I would scroll on my phone right before I slept. My dreams were definitely not at the same quality I used to have when I didn't use Instagram as much and I read more books, right? And the next advice is about obsession and focus. He says that anyone who gains access to my private data will be utterly disappointed. They will have to go through thousands of concept designs for Telegram features and millions of messages related to our product development process. They won't find any important information there, right? And then on top of that, for me, I would rather make decisions that would influence how a billion people communicate rather than choosing the color of seats in my house that only I and my relatives or probably a bunch of friends will see. Both of these illustrate what it takes, right? That is what takes to build anything great, which is just attention to detail, the focus, and not really talking about anything else, which sounds sad, but also it's like if you're obsessed with something and you really like it, you're going to spend a lot of your time doing it. And focus is also not just isn't just doing something; it's also not doing other things, right? Such as spending time choosing the color of seats in the house, and he himself doesn't own any houses. He only rents because it gives him a lot of freedom and mental clarity because he's not tied down to anything. And those things also help greatly because then you can focus more on the things that really matter. And focus and obsession on even the small details really, really matter. Is that people are not idiots. They sense often subconsciously the quality of what you offer, every nice little thing in thoughtful detail, no matter how insignificant it may seem, brings new, loyal users. The attention to detail that's basically been shared by every great artist, entrepreneur that I've read about. The future belongs to those who develop immunity to technological attention traps and retain the ability to concentrate for long periods of time. Right, this is another argument for focus, how important it is, and also this focus, like I said, is not focusing on things like the previous advice about content consumption. You really have to avoid these technological traps that, it is traps. It's highly engineered to trap your attention, right? And that really feeds away from how much care he puts into everything. And the biggest advice I had, and the one that I think changed me personally the most, is that you shouldn't listen to other people. He says that listen only to your intuition. Every time I listen to the opinion of the elders and wise ones, I wasted my time. If you feel that you need to do something, ignore the opinion of authorities. And this is a common story amongst like all entrepreneurs, is people will tell you not to do it. And then, maybe you might be right, but then if you have strong conviction of it, you probably should do it. And almost all great entrepreneurs, like Jeff Bezos leaving it, Elon Musk putting down all of his money to build SpaceX and Tesla. It's a big risk, but if you want to change the world and do great things, that is a requirement. And even the elders and the wise, the mentors you have who sort of achieved what you want, their ideas also sort of stagnate. And even as I run this podcast, it's sort of like I'm listening to all these people, but people have so much different advices. People ultimately have to figure their own way out. Like I've been interviewed a couple times. I'm not that great. I'm not an adult yet even, but when I was talking on my podcast, I realized I can really get away with anything. I can say what is agreed upon by everyone else, and that's it. I can just say do hard work, those things, and people just listen to it. And I wonder how many of the things we listen to and the wise ones that tell us the advice, have they really thought about it, right? And in the process of, I want to take a gap year or college applications, that conflict in my mind. And as the college deadlines go away, I realize people who give me advices of what to apply or not to do, or mentors around me, they don't bear the cost. They can say whatever, and to how much to the extent do you really care about other people, right? I think some people care a lot, but if there's 100 people around you, unless I'm your closest friend, I I wonder how much of your care you have enough to spend a deep enough amount of time. Because for your own life, that deep amount of thought makes sense. But for someone who isn't yourself, does it really make sense? I don't think so. He built VK, people would have disagreed. And how he built Telegram, everyone would have disagreed. 30 employees, that doesn't make sense. 2 shareholders, no venture capital, that doesn't make sense. But he chose to do that and has been successful. To end off, I guess there's so much else to talk about, but it's been kind of hard to find accurate information on. There's actually been a documentary and biography about him, but it's been in completely Russian. I've tried to translate the subtitles and tried to translate the book, but it didn't really make sense quite accurately. So I really want to revisit this episode, maybe in a year or so, and when this podcast hopefully generates enough revenue and enough attention where I can have people to help me actually directly translate it so I can get it accurately, and also just verify the accuracy of the biography as well. I've heard from a lot of people that the documentary biography are a little bit not that accurate, so I really wanted to focus on just the direct things he says and the direct verifiable information I was able to get through his own message in his Telegram channel and his VContact channel, but also just some direct interviews. This has been, I guess, my first podcast of this new style. I would really love your feedback once again, and like and subscribe and follow in whatever channel you are. It greatly helps this. I just can't tell how much I appreciate the people who listen to this. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so thankful for you for listening. This is Mother Marco Polo. Have a great day.